And so I've got some questions I'm going to ask you, and you can just respond as honestly as you want, and we'll go from there, and I'll kind of analyze those answers and see what some of our tech needs might be. Sound good? Okay.
Yep. Sounds good.
All right, so the first question is, after assisting students, parents, and teachers during digital learning, what kind of stuck out to you guys as our biggest tech needs? Big question.
So I think one of the issues with digital learning is we assume that our students are digital natives, which a lot of them are, but they're digital natives in the way they use technology. They are not digital natives in some of the basics that they have not been taught. Yes, they all use Gmail, but they don't understand how to use Google Docs. They don't understand how to use Google Slides. A lot of them were not equipped with appropriate technology to do things like a Google Meet or a Zoom meeting. So we have two big needs. We have some front-end training in the tools that they're expected to use in an educational setting. So eClass, Google Classroom, and not only the student, but the parents, they need to be trained just like their child. Appropriate ways to email your teacher. What's the appropriate manner in which to write an email. On the other hand, we also really need to look at the technology period that our students have access to, and ensure that we are choosing tools and using tools and troubleshooting issues on phones, on MacBooks, using different web browsers, using internet connections that might be really slow versus internet connections that are super fast, and thinking about a variety of options based on what they have available to them.
Anyone want to add to that?
I agree with. Oh, go ahead, Annette. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. It's fine.
Well, I was just going to say from my perspective and my department's perspective, me personally, I had really not used Google Classroom a whole lot myself before this, because I always used eClass, and that always took care of everything that I needed to do, digitally. So there was a huge learning curve for me. The first couple of weeks of DLD for me as a teacher were terrible, because I really had to learn so much stuff along with the kids. Now, I think in a way that was almost helpful for the kids because they kind of learned with me. But I think we do need more training for things other than eClass if we're going to continue to use those things, for teachers. And one other thing, and this is just from my department, because we do so much speaking and things like that. One, we used a lot of services that were free because of the pandemic that are not usually free. They were sort of given to us. So I think that a good investment with some money might be to get us access to those things if they're not free in the future if this continues.
Do you have any examples, just out of curiosity?
Just things that, like recording videos of ourselves, that's not normally always free, and, we did access to cultural things in other parts of the world, like access to museums and things like that. And normally that's not free, a lot of the things that we used. So, not that we would necessarily use all of those, but, and I guess maybe we need to think about, what exactly we want to use in the future, so that if we need to do that, then, it's not, haphazard like it sort of was this time, because, we all sort of found our own things that work best for us, but it's probably a good idea to make a list of things that maybe are best practice.
And Judson, Amanda, I'm going to kind of jump in for just a second. Judson, if y'all can do that, we can absolutely talk about it. And I think talking as a department about, okay, if this money is spent, even if we're not DLD, how are we going to use this on a regular basis? And because using it will keep people comfortable with it. So if we end up in this situation again, they have something they can readily go to.
Yes, I agree completely with that, yes.
And Mrs. Wing, there will be money for things like that. We just are waiting to see what next year's going to look like before we kind of reach out to everybody.
Awesome.
That's fair.
Yeah, and I was going to say, everybody, well, I mean, I wasn't involved totally with everybody, but there seemed to be, we maybe need to focus and to learn one set of standards versus trying to troubleshoot. You know, oh, this person's using, you know, not just Google Meet, but, you know, something totally outside the box that somebody else can't help with. It's like we almost need to learn what we have first, get proficient at that, make that our base, and then if we need to go out to something else, then that's fine. But if you got everybody going all, you know, all different points of the compass, and nobody knows what to do, then everybody else is behind the eight ball too. It just seems to me that way.
Totally agree. And I think that in this particular scenario, we were sort of building the plane as we fly it, so to speak.
Right.
But you're right. Having expectations of what we will be using and then ensuring that everyone knows how to use those, that definitely speaks to we're on the exact same page in that first point of, you know, everybody has to, and to Judson's point actually about Google Classroom, we need to ensure that everybody understands the tools that they have first.
Yes.
And then look at what are we going to layer on, even department by department, based on what their needs are. I think that's a great point because that helps with troubleshooting. And it also helps, I mean, even as simple as teaching the folks that are answering the phone some basic troubleshooting questions. Because it may be that things don't need to make it all the way to us. Teaching teachers some basic troubleshooting. Well, that's really hard as a teacher if you don't even know how to use the tool. so completely agree with you.
And just to sort of piggyback and add from like an administrative perspective, I think everyone sort of, we went in 26 different directions, like to your point, Gabby, because we were flying the plane. Another metaphor, it's like sort of throwing things against the wall and seeing what sticks. You know, so you had people trying different things, but the administrative perspective would be without necessarily following district protocols for like acceptable use. And were they, you know, the vendors that we were using, are they on the approved list? Do they have like the security support that they're supposed to? So, Bill, I was thinking about the information that you sent us about OneNote and some of its translation abilities that you know I didn't know about or I'd forgotten about, and so really making sure, you know, again, I'm just saying the same things that you guys already have, but making sure that we know all of the functionalities of what we have at our disposal and getting everybody to a comfort level. But also, Gabby, are those with the online teaching experience sort of sharing some of those best practices. You know, we didn't really get to give teachers an overview of like some of the things that they could do to work smarter, not harder. And so, you know, whatever those standards are that we set forth, I think we have some experiences that we can build on to help teachers not have to figure it all out by themselves as individuals. So, and then the only other thing that sort of bubbled up, Amanda, was just the the technology side of it, just as Gabby mentioned, we sort of assume that students are digital natives and know how to use the technology. I would say that when push came to shove and you have a need for multiple people to be using limited devices, I think that became more of an issue than we realized. So there's an actual need for the technology itself to be used for whatever platforms it is that we're utilizing. So I'll quit babbling now.
That's all good stuff. What strengths do you think Collins Hill has in the area of technology integration? How are we awesome?
I'd brag on our team. I think that, we have a fabulous, not only tech team that's sort of worked on making sure that we have, product available in the building, but then that support side of teachers feel super comfortable reaching out to any of y'all to get answers, to get help. You guys are approachable. There's that sort of encouragement of innovation and trying new things. And you guys are super knowledgeable as well. Like, you're able to help troubleshoot and to guide people through whatever it is that they're working on.
And I actually think, compared to some other schools, I mean, I think as a tech team, we sort of have a unique perspective because we hear from other schools what they're facing. I think because of Mrs. Wing and our admin team and the way our tech team has always been structured, our teachers have been encouraged to use technology. Even in the face-to-face classroom. I think that they would probably say, yeah, but it didn't truly prepare me for what I needed to do, and I agree with that. But they had a comfort level with using technology. It's not like we're one of these schools that has a ton of technology, but it's all used for testing or it's all used for different purposes. They have done things like come into the media center and do an e-class project with their students. They've done things like work with our e-class innovators to create modules that they can use. So I think there's a comfort level with the technology that allowed them, to Judson's point, to sort of jump in and figure out what was going to work for them and be okay with that trial and error. I also think our admin team has encouraged the use of creativity in the classroom. Therefore, teachers, again, it supported that comfort level of jump in and try some things. I think that was a strength because they weren't afraid of, oh my gosh, this one lesson's not going to work and I'm going to be in trouble. There was a comfort level to try things. And I think we also benefited from the fact that our PLCs are used to collaborating. And so they were able to, in some cases, not all, I would have liked to see more, but again, it was a result of the situation we were in. But in some cases, PLCs were able to come together and do some joint planning. So it wasn't like every teacher was an island trying to figure it out on their own. They could come together, they could plan together. Somebody could research what tool are we going to use for this. And then I also think, Amanda, the fact that you and Annette and Bill can speak to so many of these aspects as well is a huge advantage to our school. So many LSTCs that I was talking to, it was just them because their TST was like, not my job. And then their media folks just they didn't know the tools. You guys understand the tools so much. Again, I think it helped us to provide really solid support. It was more triage type support, again, because of the situation, but we had that support there. People weren't left waiting for days because the LSTC just couldn't get to it. I think we've got that wide variety of knowledge that was a huge help.
What areas of potential growth did you see for teachers and or administrators as a result of digital learning?
Well, I think to reiterate what Judson and Heather have said, just making people aware of what they have available to them. And it's hard. I've tried to reflect on this. It's hard because a lot of times things don't stick until you have to use it, right?
Very
and so
true.
we haven't been in a situation where we had to quote unquote use a lot of these tools. But I definitely think they'll stick from now on. So making sure people know what they have available to them. I mean, a prime example is we still have people that don't understand what VPN is and why they need to use it. And so, just the tools and the access they have, I think that's extremely important. And then, to Heather's point, what are some of just best practices from a pedagogical perspective when you're teaching online, when you're designing lessons? It was interesting. I read an article, Amanda, I'll share it with you, about sort of the 5 assumptions that you shouldn't make when you're teaching online. One of which was, and this one jumped out at me, one of which was, the assumption is, well, a live class is better, when they were talking about the fact that, yes, it's a key component, but a well-designed digital lesson is actually better because of the ability for students to do it at whatever time is convenient for them. But then it got into, what does a well-designed digital lesson actually look like? And so, I think some of the pedagogical discussions as well, to ensure that teachers are working smarter, not harder, but also that they feel good about the lesson they are creating and the instruction and the learning that's taking place.
And Heather kind of touched on this.
Can I add one other thing? I'm sorry.
Please.
No, add it.
No, I love this.
One of the things, like in terms of growth areas, and it goes back to, and I'm sort of beating redundancy here, a point of just the clear expectations. I think that one of the things that happened is we changed mid-course in the semester, and we made this switch to digital learning when there had been a semester of face-to-face learning. I think that really sort of clearly delineating expectations about like what is acceptable in terms of late work policies, and when are we expecting students to turn in work, and what happens when they don't, and all of that. That's something that we're really going to have to tackle moving forward, because that was the biggest thing. And one of the concerns that I heard is like, we made so many sort of accommodations, that what are we going to do to start this year? So I think that having those guidelines in place is something that's going to be important. So just wanted to say that.
And talking about what you said, Heather, that was a huge issue for the teachers in my department. Is everyone over and over and over again said they wish the county would just give us guidelines for everyone to follow. And I think that is probably the biggest issue that I heard from teachers, is that they, there were kids, in the same family. You have kids in elementary school, middle school, high school. They have friends in other high schools with completely different expectations. They talk to each other. Why do I have to do this when my friend at Mill Creek doesn't have to do this? And that sort of thing. So I think that teachers felt like they didn't get, not from the school at all. Everyone felt like the school supported us amazingly well. But that from the county, we didn't get what teachers felt like they needed to get from the county.
They needed or they deserved.
Amen to that, Bill.
He's like, mic drop.
Well, I think the whole situation caught the institution of the county and our brick and mortar schools. I think it caught them completely out of their element and forced them into a GOC or a GGC online or some other, University of Phoenix, where that's the way they exist almost in their entirety. We exist in the brick and mortar here and now, personal, in-person, day-to-day. And to try and flip that, this ain't a grid, boys and girls. It ain't that easy to flip. So I think the struggles that not only the administration felt, the teachers felt, the tech folks, the tech teams felt, I think it hurt all of us, because it was not something any of us even, I don't think it ever came into our consciousness, at least not in discussions that any of us had ever had. This is completely outside. Now, when I was in the military and we would have malaria quarantines and things like that, what we had to interact with was so much more limited. Now the scope is just huge. You've got kids that are pre-K that are home that parents would normally have other arrangements for. You've got kids that are in their early teens and 20s that are now having to shuttle home from other schools because their programs are cut off. I mean, it's just, and back to the point, well, I'm gonna flip, but back to the point about the resources. I know OneNote's out there, Heather. I know it's out there. I know that it can be an amazing tool if you know all things, but that could be said to any of the tools that we have, whether it's Word, Excel. I myself, I got 30 years experience with Office. I can tell you right now, I don't even scratch the surface of the surface with any of those tools, because I don't need them day to day to function in the environment I'm in. And what this situation did was make us have to reach for those. And like Justin's point, the learning curve is so steep and so much, and you're trying to focus on the students, and then your added time, when you can find it, you're either giving up sleep, or you're giving up eating, or you're giving up something else to try and make up that time that now you're having to invest in a learning curve. And I just think, and then y'all know what my situation's like, or most of it, but you only have, some of you have part of the story, others don't. There's more involvement than what was put out publicly. So you add that on top of all of this, yeah, stress, sleepless, focus, they were not paramount the last 6 months. So I'll shut up.
No, thank you for sharing. So Heather kind of touched on this earlier, but what did the participation data suggest about potential tech needs for students?
Standard devices. It'd be great if everybody could have the same thing and everybody had the same platform. Not that the school has the resources to do it, but it would be great that everybody have the same resources, just so that teachers can't say, oh, well, you should be able to do this, but I don't have that device. I don't have a Chromebook, so I can't do that feature. I only have a 12-year-old model laptop, which isn't letting me function. I don't have the internet. Level playing field would be great, but I don't know that the school or the county can do that.
And I don't think it's the school or the government's responsibility to provide internet or other resources. That some of that has to be borne by the families, and I know financially some of them can't, but it's still, I don't think that's not our business. That's not our purpose, is to provide them with all this stuff. Access, potentially, but the resources themselves, I don't agree.
I think the data shows that, to Annette's point, sort of equalized tech features, equalized devices of some sort would be a huge benefit to kids. But I also think, to Annette's point, some of that comes from, too, I think it goes back to some teacher training pieces when you're just trying to get a lesson up there, because it's 2 a.m. and you have to have a lesson by 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. or whatever, you don't have time to consider, oh my gosh, this may not work on a phone, right? And so I think there's educational components with the teachers and the administrators. I mean, for administrators, it's hard to give input when you're looking at classes and you're like, okay, I got 40 more to go, and it's 2 a.m. So, I mean, I think some training on that and sort of, again, best practices in the types of activities that will work on a variety of devices. I also think I had wanted, but again, when you're just flying, or as Heather said, throwing something at the wall and seeing what sticks. I think if we're going to move forward with digital learning to help with participation, we need a standardized tech support process for kids. We need availability in Google Meet. And Annette and I had briefly talked about this, and Amanda, this is totally my fault. I was going to get with you, and then so much was happening, it just never happened. So we just triaged as we went. But standardized tech support for students and parents. I think parents having an understanding of what their children were dealing with would have helped participation some. I also think we've got to come up with a solution for ensuring our parents are on the portal, because that's just such a key piece to being able to monitor and track their progress. And there's no good solution, and I'm hoping there may be a new solution in the future. It's just a matter of when do they flip the switch on that, given everything that's going on. But I think that would be a key piece with the participation as well.
Speaking to what you just said, Gabby, about access to the portal and the parents having access to the portal, I've had several conversations over years about why parents don't have access to the e-class pages. And I'm sure there must be some reason that I don't know, but I think it would be very helpful if parents did have access to the e-class pages so they could actually see, what it is that their students are doing.
I agree. So it's interesting. So when I worked for GOC, originally, it's different now, but when I worked for GOC, I'm getting myself confused. Not when I worked for GOC. When I worked for another online school, I apologize. Parents had what we called an observer account, and they could log in, and they had observer access to the learning management system. So they couldn't do anything for their child, but they could see everything. And so I think that is a good point. I know we've asked for years because we wanted them to have it, and the response is they do have access through their child's portal account. But believe me, we brought it back up, and actually I compiled a list for the district e-class office because they were meeting with, it's Bright Space now, but D2L, they were meeting with the company, and I put that on my list. I'm like, there's got to be a way for a parent to have an observer account through the portal. My thought process is it may be a Gwinnett County thing because the portal is internally built, but I don't know. But I'm like, that would make everybody's life so much easier if they had that access. Because saying, well, they can look in their kid's account, well, that's a slippery slope. Because I don't really want parents having the kids' credentials, because then it opens the door for what are they doing in there. Second of all,
are they doing the work for them?
Well, and I don't think they really are, but it just opens the door to that, right? Like, give them their own access.
Mm-hmm.
But the second point is, we need to consider those families where mom works all day, crashes into bed, and the kid's not even starting their work till 10 o'clock at night, right? So it's not the nuclear family anymore where everybody's home by 5 and they sit down and have dinner together. That is not how our society functions.
No.
And so we've got to account for that in giving parents the access they need. Sorry, that's my soapbox. So there we go.
Well, and the other side of that as well is the idea that, like, okay, so we give parents access. I think that there's a wide spectrum of parents that, you know, like, what do they do with it? There's like a whole nother basket or of issues that we open up by giving parents access, because I'm an insider. I was able to help Olivia navigate her e-class and going to Google Classroom because I use those, because I've done online learning myself as a student in grad school. How many of our parents have not experienced that? And so, you know, I think that, again, for the savvy and connected parents, it's going to give them a way to monitor their students and the teachers and the type of feedback that they're giving to students. But I don't know that that's going to necessarily translate to the students that maybe need it the most. So that's just something else to, you know, think about. Like, we can't get parents onto the portal. You know, how are we going to get them navigating e-class pages? And not that we shouldn't try to, but just that's like a whole nother access and equity, you know, having the time, the money, the experiences to be able to navigate that. We would have to be ready to help support that if that's the direction that we go in. Just thinking
It's a
out loud.
whole, you know, it's a whole other layer of education. I mean, Heather, we have parents that can't copy and paste a password into the reset password box. I understand they don't have those experiences. So I hear exactly what you're saying, and it would require an entire new layer of education. Which frankly, I mean, because we haven't had to, I don't know as a district that we've ever targeted truly educating our parents on what their children have access to. You know, making sure teachers understand all the tools. I think the assumption is parents know what all their kids have access to, but I don't know that they do. So I think we're maybe in a good place, though, because we can sort of start from scratch with that, and I think it would be applicable across the board. But again, you can't throw too much at them at once, or else none of it's going to stick.
And on that point too, I mean, if we were to open anything up, our contact information, all of the tech team, everybody would need to be more upfront, so parents don't have to go to a teacher because they know they're busy. Hey, this is a tech question. Maybe I could, you know, not necessarily you, Bill, or something like that, but at least have one email address for the tech team. The parent could just click on it and write us a quick note, and then somebody could get back to it. That way it's right there front and center if they have a question versus, okay, let me call the school, or who do I need to contact at the school, or something like that.
Yeah, well, I agree in that. And the shake in my head is I'm going back to Gabby and Heather's points.
Yeah.
There would have to be a completely different or additional layer of support team to handle a volume of support for students and for parents. I can't keep up with what we have in the building.
Right.
And I'm going to be sitting on the phone. You guys may sit on the phone to 2 o'clock working with parents or grades or classes, but I can tell you, at 3 o'clock, my phone gets powered off, and GCPS doesn't exist until 5:30 the next morning. And I really don't care what the expectation is. I'm not getting paid. I'm not doing it. So there has to be a realization from the district level and from the administrative level, and a certain expectation from the staff that it ain't going to be 24/7. I don't care if DLD is going on or not. So,
well, and I think that piece, Bill, can be handled pretty simply with Annette and I did a good bit of this actually throughout the spring. And I mean, we got to it as we got to it. And our staff was great. I mean, our staff was great. I didn't have a single teacher put any kind of timeline on me. Like, they were fantastic. They were awesome. But Annette, I'm almost thinking of some kind of Google form that they fill out with some basic troubleshooting info.
Okay.
Best phone number to reach you, what time of day, those kinds of things.
Sure.
And then as a team, we figure out the best way to handle that. It kind of goes back to we need a more organized way to offer tech support if digital learning is going to continue.
Right, okay.
I think it's going to be a much, much bigger discussion about what it actually looks like. And I think the teachers are probably the ones that they'll reach out to first, but if they have a simple link that they can send the parent and say, hey, fill this out, somebody will get back to you, I just think it would make them feel like there was a process in place and they weren't scrambling in the dark to figure out who do they reach out to,
Yeah. Yeah.
And the admin team, I have a parent on the phone and they say, okay, give them the link. It buys us some time, and yet from an outwardly facing perspective, it looks like, oh, look at this. They have a tech support process. Well, yeah, we're building it again as we go. But yes, we have one to start addressing the issues.
And it can also work for teachers too. If they have hey, down the road, this is what I need. I mean, they could always kind of use that form as well.
Yeah, we can have something for that too. So, I think it just goes to, we've got two different layers. We've got the parent education, the student education in terms of tools that are available, and then tech support in regards to, if we're going to continue with digital learning, we've got to have some kind of way that's more standardized to let our community know we are available for support.
It's really hard not to jump in these conversations. So many awesome ideas. Also, just thinking about your form, I know I'm not supposed to be really talking, but that would be an awesome data collection point too. And we can see like trends, what are parents struggling with most, what are the most common issues teachers are facing, what tools are being requested often. That could just be so cool. Anyway, Gabby, your class was already pretty much online, so I'm guessing they didn't have many struggles or issues due to digital learning. But Judson, like, what did you see your students struggle with personally? Like, were there any things that stand out?
I wouldn't say that my students in particular had a lot of issues with the actual things that I asked them to do. The biggest issue by far was just access to the technology they needed to be able to do it, or the time. The biggest issues I had was that a lot of my students had to start working, and they were working all day, every day, and just literally didn't have time. And it's not that they weren't in contact with me. They would email me all the time and say, hey, I've had to start working 12 hours a day. I'm trying to get to everything. Please know that I'm working on it, and I'll get it to you as soon as I can. There were several students who had one phone for them and their younger siblings to use, and that was it. And for whatever reasons, they did not go pick up Chromebooks or whatever, even though they had many opportunities to do so. It was more that sort of thing. It wasn't a lack of ability to understand how to do it. It's just they just couldn't do it for reasons like that.
That work situation's interesting. I also had several students who ended up working basically full time.
Right.
Yeah. I wonder if that.
Right. Well, the parents have lost their jobs, and with quite a few of my students, I have a huge number of Hispanic students. A lot of the parents aren't here legally, so they had no recourse. They lost their job, and there was no other option for them.
I know several of us made phone calls checking in on students who were not participating. What feedback did you get from parents about potential tech gaps and other roadblocks that the students were facing?
I had two students who did nothing the entire digital learning, only two. And the parents knew that their students were not doing the work for my class, but in both cases, they had received. They were both seniors. They received notification that they did not need my class for graduation, so they decided to focus on their other classes, and their parents were okay with that. I didn't have any issues when I talked to parents about lack of understanding of how to use the technology or anything like
A few people I talked to, well, what was it? There was a mom who said, I've been sitting down with my first grader making sure they do their work. I just assumed that my 9th or 10th grader was doing their work. I didn't think I would have to, monitor them that closely. But they ended up helping them get back on track. So, and then there was another mom that said, I'd ask him all the time and he said he'd be doing it. I didn't know this. Now we're going back and redoing this. And thank you for the phone call. So, and then I had another parent that would call me other times to ask me questions about the grading policy or this or that. And I tried to do the best I could, but my go-to answer was, please contact your child's teacher. They're the most knowledgeable one. But yeah, nobody said anything about needing technology or anything like that.
Right, I completely agree with what Annette said. A lot of the parents I talked to when their kids got behind, it didn't have anything to do with technology. They just weren't doing it, and they were telling the parents that they were, but they weren't. Obviously, these parents also were not on the portal because they could have seen that their kids weren't doing their work. But yeah, it didn't have anything to do with technology.
I had similar experiences. Yeah.
Well, and I think we all have, we probably all see it. When we get home or we get outside the four walls of our classrooms or our offices, focus on those things. It can be a little gray or it can just completely get blown away. I mean, I know when I walk through the door, I've got 6 cats and a meal to prep and half a dozen phone calls to make, and so I'm just praying my wife gets home so I can start dealing with this estate stuff or just life in general. So I can see where the focus of education, though they know it's there, I can see where that could maybe take somewhat of a backseat. I think home and life becomes a distraction. At that point, it's very difficult to stay focused unless you have a quiet setting and you lay groundwork and ground rules. Gabby will get a chuckle, but I remember Gabby was home, I think, one day out of schedule, and her kids were home, and they were trying to get into their afternoon routine, and they're like, look, this is our routine. Stay out of it. So,
Oh, yes. They told me I was messing up their routine. So, yes, routine is very important.
Well, and I'm glad I didn't misspeak or misstate that situation, and I'm glad you're here to keep it clean.
And we've touched on this as well, what type of support do you think parents would benefit from in terms of digital learning? You guys said access to, getting on the portal, maybe access to seeing their e-class pages. Was there anything else?
Just an understanding of the tools that their children have and some basics for how to support their use. I mean, and I think to Heather's point, because of varying experiences, you do keep it simple, right? But I just feel like there is a big gap in understanding, sort of on a variety of fronts, of the resources that are available that can be used, and then a true understanding of how those resources work and how they should be used.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna actually kind of make a joke, but not really. It's based, in truth, and that is, some sort of magic wand to help motivate students. So whether it's a cattle prod or a shot collar or something to get the kids to actually focus on the work. Because I've already told both sets of grandparents that if third grade is digital learning in the fall, then I'm shipping Olivia to either the Car Academy or the Child's Academy, because this lady is doing it again.
My son would totally agree with you. He doesn't know how they pass the one grandchild, but you know. No, what I was going to say was, you know how we as a staff did the tech day, technology day, where we went from session to session and learned stuff, and I know it's not the be all to end all or trying to get parents to, parent teacher PTA meetings and all that, but it would be great as a cluster almost if we could have a day of tech learning for parents. Go to whatever school your kids are at, and this is the lessons you're going to learn. You're going to go to this classroom to learn e-class. It's just, I don't know. It would be great. It would probably be more beneficial at the younger age. You always get the parents involved in that age.
That's a really.
But it would almost be like we could have a tech day just for parents. Hey, come learn about e-class. Come learn about the portal. We'll sign you up and do stuff. I don't know how much that's going to work.
I love that. Annette, keep talking. I love this. I'm making notes.
Yeah,
I just don't know how receptive some of the parents would be, but I mean, as a cluster, it would be great, even to have like a fall festival or something, and kids could be outside and the parents could be inside learning stuff. I don't know.
That's an awesome idea.
I think that's kind of what we've tried to do with our individual nights. Like, so our open house night in late August has been centered on like parent choice sessions, but the idea of it being cluster wide and more technology focused, I think that there's some real promise there.
And Heather, I think, and I'm just going to say it, sorry, I think it needs to be a Saturday, so they're not rushing home from work.
Agreed.
And exhausted. And I would argue, even if we have to social distance, we could limit the number of sessions enough and have enough people leading them that we could spread people out throughout the building. I mean, I think, and I love Annette's idea of, you're not on the portal, let's get you signed up. Oh, you don't know if you are? Let's look into it. Let's figure it out. Let's check. Let's get you fixed before you leave here. I love this, Annette. I think this is perfect.
So those
I don't know how to plan it, but
we've got the people here.
Don't worry about it, Annette. You'll figure it out. You've been nominated as the department or the chair for the committee.
Awesome. Let us know who you decide.
At the elementary level, doing those types of sessions where I just showed parents what resources we had, we'd have parents standing like outside the door. The rooms would be so packed. And then when we offered that same type of thing, like Heather was saying earlier this year, I think I had 2 parents in the first session and 2 in the second session. But after all of this, I really think that they're going to be much more motivated to get in the know about those things. So I think it would be a really great time.
Yes, I think we need to capitalize on this, because if anything's going to capture their attention, this is it. I mean, this will get them.
yeah, I mean, if we have, the same lesson being taught on 3 different levels, they can go to whatever school their child is in, and we can have devices there, different devices for them to log into and to play with, to see what it really looks like.
So now we've just decided we're planning this monster thing. That's
Well,
a little side note. I'll have to edit this out of the interview video.
Yeah, well, and to speak to all the educators present, because I'm probably I mean, Annette, you do a lot of training anyway still, but I'm really the non-educator in the group. Do you think, as Judson's point and others, you're going to get the motivated parent, you're going to get the curious parent, the parent of the child that assumed their student was participating because they told them they were, you may not reach that parent. That parent may not be motivated to even take advantage of such a resource. So maybe trying to think of additional ways, if such a thing is possible, to reach those borderline or those parents that maybe aren't as motivated, because maybe the children will feed off of a motivation from their parents, and it won't be, you have to do this. It'll be an actual want to or an interest, and you'll bring maybe a relationship of collaboration between a parent and a student that may not have been there before, because the parent's busy, like you said. You get home, you fall into bed, there's got to be a way to reach these people and instill in them that it's important. And if we do start the school year DLD, there isn't going to be this, oh, well, your grades are locked at March 12th. Their grade's going to count from day one. So I don't know how much that played into it. I would think it's probably a lot. Judson, those kids just said, look, I don't need you. I've seen your classes. I think an involvement, but I think the DLD stretched the time available for these kids to do their work so thin and so over with the different things that happened in their homes with their parents or others, that they had to make hard choices. And I got to focus here where it's going to do me the most good. I think we all do that. Where's the money going to go the furthest? Where's this going to go the furthest? And they're having to make decisions that they may not have been ready to make themselves at the ages that they're at. So I'm just saying, it's a great idea, and I agree with it, and I would be happy to try and be involved in some way. But I'm looking at it, and being the pessimist I am, I go, you already got parents that are either disassociated or not involved now. Do you really think showing them some tools is going to get them involved? I think there has to be some other type of discussion or ideas to bring those borderline, those not so interested, or those so busy parents into the fold to get student buy-in.
Hey, Gabby, is there any links on the parent portal to what the student portal looks like, what Gmail looks like, what their e-class pages look like? Is there anything on the parent portal that's linked to it? Because that would also be a great thing for the county to have on there, on the parent portal.
Videos.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So, yes and no. Yes and no. There is a bunch of stuff about e-class. And so the majority of my kind of end of year survey that I filled out spoke to what we needed in regards to Google Classroom, G Suite, parent portal in general. Because what I did realize, so I went through my own portal account as a parent, and there are no training materials about how to actually use the portal and what's in there. So
that's great for the county to be able to do and to add those other video links in there so that
they're
parents
working
know that.
Right. So I put all that in my end of year survey that I filled out. I also had lunch with a friend of mine and just said, hey, I know you participated in some of these meetings, and some of that is being worked on. I'm not sure it's quite as much as we would think would be appropriate, but some of it's being worked on. But I really feel like for it to have a true impact, doing some stuff at the local level is probably going to be required. But we're supposed to be able to see what the district has done by the end of June. And so once I look at that, then I'll know what we locally probably need to shore up and put together.
What are some things that we can do? So we don't know what next year is going to look like yet. assuming that maybe we come back in person in some form in August or September, and then say COVID strikes again as it gets colder, what are some things that we can do to kind of prepare them in advance for the potential of going back to digital learning?
First thing is every teacher from day one is going to be required to pick and go ahead and tell us, yes, I'm using Google Classroom, or yes, I'm using eClass. And there's going to be a training pathway that the district has created that they will be required to go through for those tools. And then if this doesn't come down from the district, I think as a local school, we need to require teachers to use that tool at least once a week in some format. Preferably the children are using it at home so that we can go ahead and figure out what types of resources work, what types of resources don't, and where our kids need troubleshooting support.
I think unequivocally, yeah, we've got to be utilizing the digital tools as a part of the instruction on a at least weekly basis, so that the kids are building that level of familiarity. And then just for the recordings benefit, we also have our plan of doing sort of a digital 101 prep for the students, so that we make sure that they have a base level of knowledge and experience about the tools. So I think we need to move forward with our plan for that as well, to make sure that they know some of those etiquette things and the basics of how to use the tools.
Yeah, when I was talking with my department on the last day of post planning about all this stuff, one of the biggest discussions we had was about maybe using advisement to train the students and teachers as well. We as teachers learn everything better when we have to teach it. That's how I perfected crazy levels of Spanish, was when I had to actually really understand it to teach it. So I think that would be beneficial to both the students and the teachers to use advisement for that.
Do you think there are any changes we need to make to the technology plan to account for potential return to digital learning? Are there things we need to acquire, organize differently?
Well, I think we're going to need to talk to the departments, to Judson's point, about what are the resources that you absolutely can't live without that are no longer going to be free. What do you have to have, and what are you committing to using on a regular basis that truly enhance what your digital lessons look like? I think, again, as a district, we're probably going to need to reevaluate or reflect on how did it go with loaning out Chromebooks, what amount of damage are we looking at, what are the financial implications of that, and what are we going to do moving forward to support students who don't have technology. We did have a handful of students who actually, because of whatever reason, did all paperwork. How are we going to address that? We had a couple that the parents didn't even return the work to the school until 5 days after the last day of school. And so we need to shore up kind of the access to technology piece a little bit. But a lot of that's going to be district driven, I think.
You guys have already talked a lot about ways to support teachers, training, making sure they have those resources that Judson was talking about. Are there any other things you think that we might provide in order to support them? You also talked about the Google form in case they have tech issues. But is there anything else you can think of that teachers might need?
I think a twofold discussion of, and I think this starts at the admin level, what are our true day-to-day expectations of our teachers if we're digital? Like, literally, what time of day do you expect them to be available? When do you expect them to be on Teams? And then talking to them about giving them some best practices for actually structuring their day, because I benefited from the fact that my kids are older. And in fact, my kids were like, "Mom, you're messing us up. Like, we have our routine, get out of the way." But I did this for a long time when I had little kids. I mean, I can't tell you how many, we used Illuminate, but Illuminate sessions I led praying that the baby in my lap taking the bottle, and I had the webcam angled just right, wouldn't finish the bottle early and cry, because I was trying to lead a live class. Having younger children at home that they're trying to walk through this process at the same time that they're trying to plan their lessons and take care of their own classes, I think they need some ideas and inputs for how to actually structure their day, how to make it work, sort of how to leverage the time that they do have, because otherwise you fall into the trap of you are working 24/7 and you're exhausted because you feel like it never ends. So some discussions about that. And then just also hoping that the district will provide some very clear guidance on grading policies, all the things that Judson talked about the teachers wanting, making sure that we have that as well.
So ideally, what would, assuming that we're in a traditional classroom setting again, what would tech integration look like in the classrooms?
I'd like to see more sort of utilization of the flip content, where teachers are able to provide the students with an opportunity to work with some of the base information and then utilize the classroom for more of the application of the learning. So discussions or whatever that may look like, that's something that I'm a fan of and would like to see.
I agree with that. Someone said it before. I think Gabby, you said if you don't use it, it doesn't stick. I was trained on Google Classroom, several years ago by Mary Ellen when she trained, gave us that sort of 1-day training. But I didn't use it because I didn't see that I needed to, because eClass did what I wanted to do. But what I learned, especially over the first couple of weeks of digital learning, is that by learning how to use Google Classroom, I had access to things that I didn't realize I needed. It actually made things functional for digital learning, but I found a lot of things that I can use to make my class better, even when it's in person. But without some sort of requirement to use it, I wouldn't use it. You know what I'm saying? So if we did have, and I hate to tell teachers they have to do something, but I think that I appreciate much more now the things that I have access to, because now that I've used them, I understand how they work better, and I'll be able to use them to make my class better.
Are there any experiences that you would like students to take part in that they can't right now because of a lack of technology?
I really don't think so. I mean, I feel like, to the point, the folks that made the phone calls, a lack of technology wasn't really the huge issue, right? Like, it may have been for a handful of students, and I'm thinking of those students who had to do paperwork. I don't know that the lack of technology was a huge issue, because we were flexible enough to use tools that could be or that worked on a variety of devices. So I don't know that we in our school had a huge problem with our children just simply had no form or fashion of technology that would work. Now, somebody else correct me if you had a different experience. And I know we had a handful of students, but I don't know that it was a pervasive problem that prevented kids from participating.
Sorry, y'all, my Roomba's going, so you might hear it in the background. But yeah, I don't think that it was an access issue as much as a motivation, piece. And so how do we get kids to work when it's harder? They don't have the luxury of sitting back and letting the teacher do the work. That's a fundamental issue that we had with digital learning. So I've talked about the cognitive apathy of our kids. They don't want to have to think. Well, now we're asking them to think and to do all the work themselves. And so that's a shift that we have to get at sort of fundamentally. So I don't think it's a technology issue. It's more of a motivation issue for students. We've got to figure out how to engage them and make it worthy of their time. Figure out how to spark. Well, you know what I'm saying, Judson. Like make them think that it's worthy of their time.
And to your point, Heather and Judson's, Annette, back me up or correct me, but there were, I'd say, between 45 and 60 Chromebooks that were assigned to students that were identified as either needing technology or requesting it that never showed up to get it.
That's about correct, yeah. So, and there were numerous phone calls and contacts.
Yes, there were efforts on top of efforts.
Yeah. So we tried to get it to them, but they never came to pick it up.
And I think one more thing, and again, this isn't a technology issue, but I think there was an overarching feeling among kids that they couldn't fail, that they were going to be taken care of whether they did the work or not. And so that was a huge non-motivator for a lot of students. And so I hope that, in the future, students and parents will know that the work that they do will count for something. I think that was a big issue, is that they didn't feel like if they didn't do anything, there would be consequences.
But the knowledge, it has to your cognitive, whatever the words you used, Heather, they have to buy into it that this is for their future selves, that they need this information now. The apathy part. They need to figure out that, hey, I may not need Spanish exactly, but I'm going to need that tool on how to do it and how to learn something new in the future. Or I'm going to need that math. I don't see it right now, but my future self will need it. They just can't see past this moment in time.
Kind of jumping back to what technology integration looks like in classrooms ideally, is there anything we need to provide for teachers, like materials, training? What kind of support would they need to make that happen for their classroom to look the way we think it should look with tech integration?
Well, as somebody who earned her master's degree with a focus on integrating technology in the classroom, but did that 17 years ago, some of the foundational theory still applies, but obviously, we've moved beyond web quests. Those were the nouveau thing back when I was working on my degree. So I think that, yes, it all sort of dovetails. It goes with both the theory and the pedagogy of what makes a good online lesson, and then what are the tools that go with it. So there's the two pieces of that, and then also, again, the student piece, the motivation piece. How do you get a 15-year-old to use a part of their brain that isn't really mature enough yet to know that it's important that they prioritize what they're doing now for their future self? So all of those things come together, and I think we're going to have to share best practices and provide some of those resources for teachers.
Well, and I think I'll be the mean one and say it. I think some of this is going to have to be mandated. And again, I think maybe it was Judson, I can't remember who. I'm not a huge fan of mandates. As a teacher, I didn't like them. but also, to the World Language Department's point, though, sometimes you need them. You have to know what the expectations are. If you don't know what the expectations are, to Bill's point, then you're going to prioritize, right? Because we all have to. There's limited time. So I think some clear mandates or clear expectations, I'll say that, about this is what will be done on a weekly basis in regards to just using tools, but then also integrating technology overall into your classroom. I think that having them use the tools once a week is great. But what does it look like on a bigger scale? And how do we do that with the technology we have? What are some other resources we could utilize? This will also help us sort of evaluate our techniques. I mean, we have a lot of departments that just are like, well, I have money to spend, let me buy Chromebooks, and that's fantastic. But how are we going to use those in a systematic and intentional way? So I think some from the admin team, Heather, some kind of clear expectations of what that looks like, and our team can be part of that conversation. I hope we would be. And so I think that's sort of another layer to it.
Yeah, and of course, y'all would be, but also it's that idea of this is a bigger issue. We're talking about a pivotal moment in sort of educational history of we have a chance to really sort of continue to revolutionize what education looks like. And so, are we going to have decentralized approaches to that? We're going to have 19 high schools, and that's just the high schools doing 19 different things, working harder, not smarter, creating all of these resources for our teachers in a time when our budgets are being threatened to be reduced even more? Or is there some sort of organizational resource that can be provided? You would hope and think, or I would hope and think, that we might have a little bit more leading from the district level, but short of that, that we're going to react on a local level and do the best we can to help support teachers and give them the tools they need to be effective.
I'm cracking up at that answer. You just made my whole day.
Well, you know me. I'm not afraid to speak the truth, good, bad, or ugly.
Well, to everybody's point, sorry, Justin. I had a conversation with Jim Aldred, who is teaching summer school and had some technology issues. And so we set up a meeting at my house because it just cut the difference between where he lives and where the school is. And I'm already on my way home. So Jim came over and brought his laptop. We were talking. He's got a summer school class of about, I think it was like 18. 12 of them are ESOL kids. He can't get all but maybe 6 to even respond to stuff. And this is summer school. Now, I don't know, given the COVID situation in summer school, are they still paying for the virtual summer school the way they would for brick and mortar in person? And if they are, the resources that these parents are investing, that's the type of response they're getting. That seems pretty wasteful and misguided in where those funds are. They're throwing them and saying, look, I'm giving you the opportunity. But again, there's a disconnect in what the parents are telling their students, what the students are responding with, what the expectation is. And Jim's trying to keep people focused. But with ESOL, Judson, with language classes, and Luz and Maggie did to ESOL, that the language barrier, the economic barriers, and some of the home units, the way that the families are, Gabby spoke to the nuclear family, it's just a completely different dynamic to get the education through to those people. And so I think where Jim's finding himself with summer school, this is, hey, look, you need this. And the need's there, the motivation should be there. It doesn't seem to be. From what limited I have heard from parents or teachers speaking about parent communications and what the conversation I had with Jim recently, it just seems that when we went digital, it was like everybody was lost, whether it was the students, the parents, the district building the plane as we fly it. It just seems like it just threw the whole dynamic of education in the students' lives into a tailspin. Well, for some, not for all. We had kids that excelled, I'm sure. But for those that didn't participate or just turned the switch off, it made a big difference. So I think trying to reach those is going to be some of our biggest challenge.
I mean, when the kids are required to come to school, that's an effort on their part. They know that's a priority, that they have to be up at school at during these times of the day. It's a priority to get there. If they're at home doing stuff, I'll just do it whenever I can. It seems like some of the attitude, I'll do what I'll fit it in between my other things. It's not. And like you said, there were people that had to work, so they had to reprioritize. But there's some of the kids I know a neighbor down the street, but she said her son was always chatting or doing something else with his girlfriend or whatever, wasn't prioritizing that school was important. And it's easier to do it digitally like that than if you were in the building where you have to focus. You have to put in the effort to get to school to do something, whereas digitally it's like, well, okay, but I'll get to it as soon as I do this. And then something else comes along that pushes your learning towards the back. It's like they have to realize that the education is the first part.
And even if the social aspect of school is a huge draw, so when you lose that, we're going to have to find something that's, we're never going to find something that's as engaging or as big of a draw as the social aspect. But there's, like Heather was talking about, you've got to make it matter. So we've got to figure out, like, what can we do to make it compelling and interesting and engaging enough to where they want to be invested in it without the social aspect.
It comes back to they've got to realize that what they're doing now is going to have an impact on their future. What they learn now is necessary for the future, even if they can't see it.
If we can solve that problem, we can fix fix anything. Do y'all have any final thoughts about the technology needs of Collins Hill?
I think we covered them all. We covered way more than I thought we would this morning.
Oh, y'all kind of killed it, yeah. This was definitely like a good group of people to have this conversation with. I'm making a survey for teachers about technology needs and digital learning, and is there anything you guys want me to ask them that might benefit your planning and thinking about next year?
I would love to know from a teacher's perspective, and actually this will be two birds, one stone, because I was going to do this, what specific tools they would like training on. Because I have my thoughts based on the issues that came up or the questions I was asked, but we need to hear from them. And I would bet a lot of this is in those end of year reflections, but we need to hear from them about the specific tools that they want more training on.
Okay.
And you can either make a list, I can help you with that, or it can be open-ended. I mean, I'm totally fine with that, but let's just make sure if it's open-ended, it needs to be specific tools.
I can do open-ended with examples. Well, thank you guys so much. This is like the most interesting project ever because I enjoyed like every minute of this conversation. And now I'm thinking about, I've got all these things in my head for next year, and I'm just thinking about like, we need to plan to meet and talk again about all of these different components and ideas.
Well, and I think that one of the things that I'm sort of taking away from the past few weeks is putting thought into action, not just thinking it. That's sort of my commitment moving forward, is to really try to have that impact. So just random share, Amanda, I dropped off some books for the Gwinnett Coalition, their little library program, Great Little Minds. And like seeing the high school students there on their summer break helping to sort the books, and there was a Collins Hill student there. Gabby, you came up, one of the students was from GSMST, so I name dropped you, and knowing Ivy. But you know, it just like literacy is important, digital learning is important, education, what we do is so important, and we need to continue pushing the envelope and getting out of our comfort zones, and all of the problems that we identified. You know, we're not going to work towards alleviating some of those if we don't keep pushing. So hopefully leadership will come from above, but if it doesn't, then we're gonna put you know, rubber meets the road with us, and put these ideas into action to take care of our own, is sort of where I'm at. So I'll shut up now.
Agreed.
I have a question for the educators. Given all this stuff with digital learning, how do you think this fits in with the recent district kind of awareness of digital citizenship? And how does the digital involvement that's associated with the DLD educational experience that we have, how do you see the district's awareness of digital citizenship? How do you see maybe something more local that we can do? Because the involvement we got from digital, from what I'm hearing from this meeting, I mean, Heather and the administration, Gabby's exposure to the administration, it just makes me wonder, the students' perception of digital citizenship seems to be in their Instagram and Snapchats, more so than it does in a tool that can be, to Annette's point, they see where they are now, they don't see where it can benefit them in the future. The more able and versed they are in a variety of these tools could also lay the groundwork for future employment, or I would prefer entrepreneurial ventures. So I'm interested in to hear from the educators how this.
So in Mr. Wilbank's statement that he pushed out last week, he made reference to the 3R projects. That's rights, responsibility, and respect. So, you know, good, bad, or ugly, you can say a lot of things. I've said some things about what my wishes are from the district level, but I do think that that is a priority, and a priority of Mr. Wilbank's in particular is the civic piece, the civic engagement. That is very much, and you're hearing from a former social studies. I shouldn't say former social studies, because like social studies is what we do for the rest of our lives. So from voting this morning to being able to engage in this dialogue and to share my opinion in a way that, you know, I'm not going to shy away from saying it, but I'm going to say it in a way that's respectful. I think that those things very much do dovetail together well, and that's part of where we can model and get their little immature brains to be thinking about what, to your point, like what's good practice, what's the etiquette that we teach them when using their G Suite, that also goes to their social media as well. So what are they sharing? Why are they sharing it? Are they critically thinking about it? Are they vetting resources? Are they just retweeting something, or are they looking at it, to see where the source is coming from? So all of those things are that critical thinking that my hope is to get the kids out of that sort of cognitive apathy where they don't want to think bigger picture and get to that point. Just if we make some progress, we're not gonna change every single person, but just like a little less lazy, a little less or a little more thoughtful in what they do and what they say. It's gonna have a big impact.
And on a more micro level, Bill, the district is pursuing becoming a common sense media district. And so there are actually requirements for every school in the district, because X% of your schools have to be common sense media schools. So one of my projects for next year is we've got to meet all the requirements to become a common sense media school. It's actually not hard, but it just started me down the road of thinking about how do we integrate digital citizenship just sort of into the culture of our school, with all stakeholders. What are we teaching them in the classroom? What are we sharing with them through advisement? What are we teaching our community based on our communications, based on what's on our website? And I think there are lots of ways to do that. So that's one of the things that I'm going to be working on, because they don't think about it. Like Will, this past weekend, he was filling out athletic questionnaires for a couple of colleges, and they asked for all of his social media handles. He had to put every single one on there. And he's like, oh, that's cool. And I'm like, wait a minute. I said, you know why they're doing that, right? I said, they are looking into you to see how you represent yourself on social media. I'm like, so why don't you go back through and check that out? And it just isn't something that your typical 15, 16, 17-year-old is going to think about. And so as a school, I feel like we've got a responsibility to address that for the here and now, but also how it's going to impact them in the future in the variety of steps that they want to take, whatever they want that to be. So there's a plan for that. I'm going to create a plan, and I would love input along the way.
On a much smaller classroom level, I did go back and create a brand new syllabus for library science for next year, and I, because of this, remembered to include an entire section on netiquette and how we interact online, how we participate fully in discussions, how our responses to our peers are thoughtful and meaningful, and then also being more cognizant of when I'm pulling resources for them. For example, we did a book club. We found the book online. We talked about, I had to be very clear that like the copyright on this has expired, so it's open source. We're allowed to use this. This isn't just me giving you a book. So modeling and then being very open with them about copyright and resources and fact checking and all that fun stuff, because it's going to be a lot more, a bigger part of our curriculum, I think, for library science next year.
That's awesome. That's great. And that's why I want us to talk, to make sure that, again, smarter, not harder, as we develop these things.
Anybody else something? Thank y'all so much. That was so much longer than I anticipated, but I loved it, and I'm really sorry if it took up too much time, but I really enjoyed the conversation. So, thank you.
This was awesome, Amanda. Thank you for your time.
It was awesome. I enjoyed it.
The brain power that we have all together, it's always good to sort of have an opportunity to be reflective and to engage in conversation with fabulous people like y'all. So thank you. Y'all have a good rest of your day.
You too. And when y'all are ready for another conversation, non-school required, let me know.
Yeah. Okay. Bye, y'all.
Bye, guys.
Bookmobile.
Bye.
Bookmobile.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Thank y'all.